on to Ace Hood. Ace Hood, who is from around our way, Miami, Florida guy. I would say his peak was like in the mid and late 2000s musically. Would you say that that's fair?
Yeah,
Um, yeah,
late
I would say like
2000s.
yeah, mid to late 2000s. He was routinely featured on songs on DJ Khaled's compilation albums, and had guest features on there with people like Rick Ross and Lil Wayne and Trey Songz and whatnot. He was recently on Cam Newton's, one of Cam Newton's shows. I think Cam Newton has two shows. He has the sports show, and then he has the Club Shay Shay type show.
Uh,
The show where he brought on that despot, the charlatan,
oh,
Cheyenne Bryant.
yes. Who can
Yeah.
forget that?
So Ace Hood was on Cam Newton's version of that kind of show that he has. And they got onto the subject of marriage and relationships. And so Ace Hood kind of waxed poetically about his approach to marriage and how he's never really stepped out of the boundaries of his marriage because he's always been able to control, urges, and he never really felt the need to do so because he's always been committed. So let's listen to Ace Hood talk about his approach to marriage and then give our thoughts about what he had to say.
Decide to say that now I don't want to indulge in that. So in terms of being in a marriage, for me, like I told myself, I'm gonna take that serious. I don't play with marriage. I'm not that type of guy. I don't play with, you know what I'm saying? I'm very intentional when I do something, dog. You feel me? So I'm like, all right, if we're gonna get married, we're gonna do this, we locking in. So that's how I hold out on the temptation, bro. I respect mine no matter where I go. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, so obviously before my wife came into my life, I was the boy. I've had my fair share of women doing whatever I want, boom, boom, having fun, da da da, whatever. I learned very earlier on, bro, like that I had the power in that. So I was never the type of man that just wanted to share myself with a bunch of women. I always felt like I was a man of value, and I always seen that once you connect with somebody on that intimate level like that, it changes the circumstances of things. And that didn't always work out well for me. So a part of my change and evolution was for me realizing that that's a part of my power. You know what I'm saying? I can't just get that out to bomb, 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 bomb. I can't just get that out to anybody. And this is just coming in the game because I always felt like what made me step out of the game with that, of just knowing of like, bro, they gonna always be there. A lot of things in my life I call forth on. I pray about it and I call it forth. So it's not like just a shock. You know what I mean? So I started positioning myself even when I was with the mother of my children and me and her just, you know what I mean? I'm pulling up at a house 3, 4 a.m. in the morning, seeing my kids sleep. That dynamic wasn't healthy for me, dog. To that in terms of recognizing the power that I have by retaining, you see what I'm saying? By keeping that. You feel me? Because now I got the say so and the power to be able to say, yes, I want to do it. And not you just shake in my face. And then now I feel like, now I'm turned up. It's like, nah, I got the power to decide, like to see that and say that it's beautiful and to decide to say that now I don't want to indulge in that. So in terms of being in a marriage, for me, like I told myself, I'm going to take that serious. I don't play with marriage. I'm not that type of guy. I don't play with, you know what I'm saying? I'm very intentional when I do something, dog. You feel me? So I'm like, all right, if we're going to get married, we're going to do this, we locking in. So that's how I hold out on the temptation, bro. I respect mine no matter where I go. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like,
No free ads.
Yeah, no free
World
ads,
Star.
man. Screw you guys. Hate that damn website, man. But yeah. So what did you think about his what he had to say?
Very well said. Very well said. Ace is as you can see in that clip there, very, he's a level-headed dude. He knows what's up. And you know, he never was really, even though he was definitely had industry ties. Um, if you followed his IG page back in the day, I used to, and he was just straight up and down. Yeah, he was on Khaled tapes and stuff like that, but he was still like a regular person, if you will. He did his industry stuff. He dibbled and dabbled, but overall, he didn't come off like an industry man. Felt like it was more of a, hey, this is my job. I got to look the part. So with that stuff being said, in all due respect to his situation here, his old lady, I used to follow her too. Um, and I used to, his she knows what's up. Like she's no knucklehead, so she knows what's going on out here in the world. And so, um, so I'm sitting there following her because, to me this is the ticket. I'm following that, and then now I'm seeing Ace Hood all up in the pictures. I'm like, hey, man, get this guy out of here. All right. And then but then I would see certain things that he would post or whatever. And he's no knucklehead either. Like he knows what's going on out here. Like he's no fool. And so when they got together, I thought it was more of a IG type of thing, whatever, whoop. But they were staying together. And so when you shared me this clip, and I was like, oh well, who's his old lady? Oh, it's the same girl. Yeah, he's been with her, man. So they gotta to me, it's they have for where he's at, for who he is, somebody that people know, somewhat of an industry man. He has himself more of a traditional type of situation at the crib, even though they don't live a traditional life. They still on TV or they still doing things, So, but their dynamics, I would say it comes from a place where he knows who he is as a person, and he knows what he has to do, as a man in the situation. And from what I knew about her before all of this stuff, is that she knows what it is to be a woman and do the woman type thing in a situation. So I feel as though that they made it work. They made it work, and it's a strong, solid situation. And I'm glad that he's in that space and can confidently say that. Because and again, all due respect, man. All right, but what I'm saying, his old lady, man, she's put together, and she has as far as I'm concerned, a good mindset. So why would he jeopardize that? If a man in his right mind, why would he jeopardize that by being a goofball? But that's a
Because
solid situation.
by not being in your right mind, you said
Yeah,
it.
yeah. And so, but he is, So I'm glad that he's doing that because it sounds like he got himself a solid, stable situation, and you can just hear it in his response because there was nothing there that he had to prep for. He didn't say, okay, Cam's going to ask me this and I'm going to go on this soliloquy. It's like, nah, man, this is how he feels because this is how he lives, and I'm happy for him for that. So, shout out to Ace Hood, man. I agree with this mindset. I talk often on here about people, having alternative ways of doing relationships. All right. But then there's some people that's actually built and cut for that actual monogamous life. And it sounds like him and his old lady got that going on. And I have no issues with that at all. But what are your thoughts, man, on Ace Hood saying that, hey, man, I'm no cheater, man. I'm not out here playing the field. I got a family and a wife at home. And I'm not jeopardizing that. What are your thoughts, bro?
I like very much what he had to say, not necessarily because it's championing marriage or monogamy, but because um, it's championing control and not allowing oneself to be controlled. Sometimes on this channel, when we cover topics like this, I'll bring up one of the core principles that I live by, which is a man not being a slave to vagina, which in turn will also cause me to call out other men who I perceive to be slaves for vagina. And it's part of an overarching, ongoing conversation about my belief in the importance of men not being slaves to vagina. Because when you are a slave to vagina, I think you willfully are ceding way too much power to not only women, but to the rest of the world, based off of the premise of the acquisition of sex. I think that when you are someone who is what I call a slave to vagina, you're controlled by sex. And when you're controlled by sex, you're easily controlled by anything or anyone that's offering you even the illusion of it. Because even when we get on here and we talk about stuff like OF all the time, a lot of these guys who are forking over thousands of dollars per year subscribing to these channels, they're not even actually getting the benefit of physical contact, and they're still paying all this money because these guys are even being controlled by the illusion of sex,
Which is ridiculous.
which is insane. That's insane because that's that not only like it's bad enough to be controlled by sex in and of itself, but to be controlled by the illusion of sex and aperture and avatar of sex, to me, is something that I will never be able to wrap my head around. I don't understand it. It is incomprehensible to me. So I think a man's position in the world, in my opinion, has been ceded to corporations, advertisers, entities, and women on the basis of the acquisition of sex. That's what I believe. And I think a lot of men today have ceded a lot of their rightful authority in the world on the basis of the acquisition of sex. And that is not to suggest that sex isn't something that you shouldn't pursue, that it isn't something that's important, that it isn't the enjoyable, fun experience that we all know it to be. But there is a difference between indulging in that reasonably and completely ceding all of your authority in the world on the basis of it. Those are two completely different notions. And a lot of guys today are being controlled actively, either by women or by social media and the internet, on the basis of sex. And when you're easily controlled, you can't actually contribute to the world in any meaningful way, nor can you actually reach the point in which you have actualized and you're able to give something to the world that you're meant to give to, because you're too preoccupied with the pursuit of sex.
Mhm.
So the reason why I appreciate his comments is because he was talking about maintaining the self-control to, even though he's in the presence of this and in the presence of various temptations, there's a point to which it can't control him to start to act in kind in ways that are otherwise undesirable.
That's
And
fair.
I and I feel like that is removed from, like, to me, you can do it conventionally, because I agree with you. I think there's multiple ways to skin a cat when it comes to relationships nowadays, but I think the importance is honesty. And what I
Mhm.
think is lost is honesty.
Mhm.
So if you're a guy, or if you're a man or a woman, and you want to do things alternatively, where you have a polyamorous thing going on, or you know that from time to time you're going to want to explore other options, but you also don't want to forsake whatever it is that you do have at home, you have to disclose that to whoever you're dealing with so that they can make an informed decision.
Mhm.
That's the only thing that I've ever said. I'm not here to tell people to be monogamous, nor am I here to tell people to not be monogamous. What I am suggesting is people should be honest. If you're for the streets, let people know you're for the streets. And that's if you're a man or a woman. So to me, it doesn't matter whether you're doing things the conventional way, being monogamous, or doing things the non monogamous way, where you're maintaining multiple options and keeping things open and casual. That to me is irrelevant. That to me is irrelevant. What is relevant is, particularly for a man, having the ability to control, as you like to say, keep it in the pants. Like, keep it in the pants doesn't mean don't do it. It just
Right.
means don't have it means don't completely lack in self-control. To
Correct.
where any woman or anybody or anything can come your way, dangle a little carrot in front of you, and at that point you'll spend whatever,
On go.
do whatever, go wherever, give whatever, and all you're getting in return is that. When you're doing that, to me, you're ceding your power, and that to me is not something that a man should be doing. And so, to his credit, he is someone who, no matter how, however he may have gotten to the point in which he does have that control over himself, I think that that is something that is sorely lacking for the most part, uh, with today's current man, in my opinion. The ones who are 10 toes down and are able to sort of be on their square and not let it get them off the beaten path. Kudos to these guys. But as we have seen, there are far more occurrences out here of these guys who are what I call slaves to vagina. At a moment's notice, if that carrot is dangled in front of them, it becomes, how much do I have to spend? Where do I need to go? What do I need to do? What do I need to give? You can have it all, so long as I get a bite out of this carrot. And that to me is a disadvantageous position for any man to be in, but it is a position nonetheless that a lot of men find themselves in.
Yeah, that's a good point. Because the mindset, the mindset to be disciplined in a field that he's in, where you can pretty much have a field day. It's not something that's very common. Um, and honestly, often you don't hear rappers even talk about it. Um, Even the rappers out there that are married, and about their wives, outside of Chance the Rapper, you don't really hear you don't really hear them talk about their situation or their philosophies on their marriage,
until the divorce comes.
of course,
Yeah.
and irreconcilable differences, I'm sure. Right. And so and that's why I was making that point earlier, because I was following Ace Hood on Instagram, not because it's Ace Hood, it's because he wasn't a knucklehead. And so you could tell by some of the things that he would repost, some things he would say. So he was in a space to where, mentally, that even with all of these bullets flying around, there was this situation of, I want to be out of the game. Like, him out here dating or DMing with intention, not just, for the Friday night splack off. And, able to be able to have that balance in his position. Yeah, man, that is unfortunately, it's not the norm, I would say, and it's worth commending, honestly. But for doing your job, I take care of my kids,
Right.
good for you. But it's still a situation where there's not too many people out here doing that, so you got to applaud the people that are, And so, but yeah, that's the right mindset. That's the right mentality to have. But even being so, let me also say this. It helps to have options. Okay. It helps to have options. It helps to know that you've got, air quote, money in the bank just in case things don't go right. You know, he's not doing this through desperation. He's doing it through choice, which is also a great position to be in. So, and what I mean by he's got options and stuff like that, like, yeah, man, God forbid I'm not speaking this on him, but somebody that's in a similar situation and it goes left, for whatever reason, those women, like he said, that will always be there, they're still going to be there.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not like a poverty mindset when it comes to, I can walk out the door and get some if I want it, which helps. When people are in a state of desperation, for instance, whether it's financially or insecurity wise or whatever like that, they exercise that in their day-to-day behavior. You got to be a solid person in order to pull off stuff like this and say the things that he said. So I would say it's a concert of things that has men in a space where they become slaves to vagina. And it's not just one thing you could put your finger on. It's how that person was raised. It's what they, came up seeing in the house. It's the programming and the conditioning that they got over the years. The positive and negative reinforcements for actually shooting your shot when you were in school. And, there's a whole bunch of stuff that adds up over time to where these guys become, the loners that they are nowadays, or the guys that pay for it nowadays. It's a myriad and a concert of things. So for some of those men, for instance, that are living like that, and they do have options, well, they're already in a mindset where, they'll pay for it. So they'll just start paying for the options like you see these celebrity dudes do now. And that's what I'm saying. A lot of this comes on upbringing and knowing who you are. And Ace Hood's old, man. So he came up, I'm sure, in a household that had values. And he probably wanted to have those values his whole life, even though he was a rapper. And so, it's things that add up to this. So all that stuff to say is that the population is what it is right now, and the OF subscriptions and all of those things are going through the roof. is because a lot of people are not being raised on values. The same thing that you like to talk about as far as like people don't have values and stuff like that. And it's like, yeah, these people that we're running into don't have them, and they were taught not to, or, through either neglect or whatever. And so it's a sad state of affairs. But not everybody has a household that cultivates value. And so he seems to be in a position that he has those, and he's exercised them. And yeah, man, he's living his dream. And there's no hate on that, man. But the larger systemic issue is more of an indictment towards what American culture is, more than the actual individual person per se, because we've gotten into this mess due to um, people being funneled into this through the various dopamine things that are being sold to them on a daily basis. So in order to break that, you need somebody with you while you're watching the TV, while you're playing a video game, while you're doing whatever, to hold your hand and say that, but that's not reality. And a lot of people didn't have that. So, but yeah, man, fair points. But those guys out there that's paying for OFs, telling them not to. This was a problem that started when they were in elementary school.
Yeah, sure. I've often said discipline is a skill. It's like you, you know, having respect for people isn't an intrinsic trait. Having consideration for people isn't an intrinsic trait. Being mannerable, these are not intrinsic traits. I think that these are value sets that are learned through teaching. I think discipline is another one of those things. Good decision making is another one. All of these things to me are humanistic skills. Emphasis on the word skill because they have to be taught. You don't just naturally acquire them by birthright. Discipline goes hand in hand with not being controlled by sex because you have to literally be taught the skill of discipline in order to maintain the discipline necessary to not allow sex to control your behavior. And the lack of discipline, to your point, does come from the environment that you are raised in, the immediate environment, which does not prioritize the importance of instilling the value of discipline to you. So when you actually grow and mature into adulthood devoid of that skill, it's going to manifest itself in various ways, such as being willing to spend a lot of money to be patronized on OnlyFans. So I do understand that. And I don't disagree with you totally, but I do think it's become far more pervasive than the simple explanation of a lack of values. I think the culture of a lack of discipline has become so pronounced, particularly in this country, that even if you're raised in an environment in which you are given the opportunity by caregivers to learn the skill of discipline, you can still go left if
Yes.
you are exposed to far too much content and conditioning, and as you like to call it, social engineering and mind control, which puts you in a spot where you throw all of that stuff that you learn by the wayside.
Yes.
And that to me is the dangerous part, because we're at a point now where even if you are coming up in an environment which allows for you to gain these very valuable humanistic skills, something can still happen, uh along the way at some point in that delicate process that causes you to be out here looking like an idiot, being Adrian Bronner or being Safari or being or it ain't just celebrity guys, it's just everyday regular people.
It's everyday dudes,
It
man.
is. It's everyday dudes who don't know how to exercise that level of discipline and not allow their behaviors to be controlled by sex. And
Yeah.
mind you, sex isn't the only force that can control a man's behavior. There's other things that can control a man's behavior. I think sex is one of the ones that's the most pervasive according to today's culture, but it's not the only one. And all of these things don't have to control your behavior if you're fortunate enough to fully develop those skills of discipline. And unfortunately, nowadays, um, a lot of us don't have the opportunity to fully develop those skills. And it isn't because we're not being given enough runway to develop them in our immediate environments. But when we're going off to school or hanging out in our various social circles or spending 8 to 10 hours a day on these damn phones, a lot of those things we're powerless against. And those things can also heavily influence one's inability to develop skills of discipline. So when you are able to recognize someone who does live a disciplined existence, and again, discipline doesn't mean you don't do anything and
Right.
that you stay shelled up and you're not living. It
Right.
just means you have the ability to not allow worldly influences to control your behavior.
Exactly.
And
Yes.
so, whenever you are able to recognize people who maintain the wherewithal to not allow worldly influences to control their behavior, it's something worth pointing out because it is a skill, a trait, whatever you want to call it, that unfortunately these days is sorely lacking. So, I commend him for talking that way because he comes off to me as an individual who I'm sure he has his vices, I'm sure he has his indulgences, but he comes off as somebody who is disciplined enough to not allow worldly influences to control his behavior. And there's far too many men who are not in position to say the same thing, unfortunately.
Yeah, man. And I agree with that. And my last point is that what the part where we're talking about, at least for me, where I was mentioning the fact that the lack of values, and it's in that realm of lack of culture, because the culture in America is commercialization and consumerism. And if that's what your culture is, buying the latest shoes or having the whatever, whatever, you're a part of that ritual in that society. And what people need is, as far as culture, is a set of rituals, or like your book likes to talk, a set of habits. And if you don't have those rituals for yourself, then it makes it harder. Then you're going up against, you literally have zero defense when it comes to the world.
Yeah.
But if you have those regimented rituals that you do for yourself, nothing spooky here. I'm talking about literally like getting up and taking a urination first thing in the morning, whether you know it or not. That is a ritual. Okay, because you don't have to do that first. Your body may tell you you have to, but you don't have to do that. But you do that because, "Oh, this is what I do," and that's a ritual that you do. But another ritual that you do is when you first thing you wake up, probably some people out here, is you get on your phone and start doom scrolling. Okay, that's a ritual, whether you know it or not.
Yeah.
And part of what this society has done is it has given Americans and in the world, in many cases, a set of rituals that they have to follow. And these people are following along the ritualistic patterns of commercialization and consumerism. So then their everyday actions are reflections of that. Relationships become transactional. Everything is transactional at this point. Why is that? Well, because everybody has bought into the culture of America. So people like to say they don't have one. It does. It's buy and consume. And so the end results of that, all right, the byproduct of that is what we're now seeing happening to the state of relationships, the state of dating, and the state of men when it comes to these types of things, because they fall down these various holes that were built and constructed by the very same system that told you you had to get online and start watching women shake their tail feathers. So so to have all of those things swirling around you at all times, okay, having financial status resources like Ace Hood has, so where he can indulge if he wants to, and choosing not to, is something, as we've been mentioning, that he does have a set of values and disciplines and things like that. And certain disciplines are a ritual. Getting up and going to the gym at this time of day. Why? Because if I'm not going in the gym, what the hell would I be doing? You know, and it's a lot of things that come with that type of decision making. So all in all, I'm with you, bro. But this is not a situation where, and I'm not saying you're saying this, but just for the conversation, it's not a situation of saying, oh, be disciplined to be no, you have to be disciplined to defend yourself against all the flying influences that's going around you 24/7. And if you don't have a regimented way that you handle the worldliness, then you will become part of the world. And last I checked, you never really want to be a part of that. So points well taken, man. And I'll double down on it, man. I'm happy for the dude for having what he wants and moving accordingly. I say that.
Yeah, I remember there's a classic acceptance speech that's it's often used for like motivational speaking. It's like used for motivational content. Like a lot of companies will use it. It's like I think he's a Marine or a member or in the Navy or something, and he's giving an acceptance speech and he's talking about having healthy rituals, and the importance of how they help keep you grounded and focused. And so he mentions simple things like, wake up every morning and make up your bed, for example.
Yes.
I forget the name of the video, but it's a very famous, I'm pretty sure a lot of people might recognize it if they see this. Y'all know what I'm talking about. I think he's a Marine or he's a member of the armed forces. I forget whether he's a Marine or in the Navy or the Army, but he's giving an acceptance speech at a university and he's talking about the importance of that. And he's like, hey, listen, man, every day you get up and you you make up your bed. Never renege on that. It's important. Always maintain these healthy habits and rituals. And he goes down the list talking some other things. But yeah, a lot of people, I don't know what it's like to not live a life or an existence built on routine. So I try not to judge people who don't come from that frame of reference because my life is heavily predicated on habits and routines and rituals. So I don't know what it's like to not live that way, but I do know that a lot of people don't live that way, and it's directly correlated to it is, in my opinion, directly correlated to a lot of the madness that's going on out here.
Yeah, well said, brother. Well said, man. I need to be a little bit more regimented myself. But yeah, we'll leave it at that.
Hey, shout out to Ace Hood, man. Good
Hey, man.
for you, bro. Yeah.